Thank you very much. So it's a rather fancy title, but I want to bring it down to sort of ground it a little bit as to what this means and how we bring some of the principles that we use in our everyday lives back into the workplace. There we go. So what do we mean by online communities and how important are they? Well, on reflection, we perhaps don't appreciate how ubiquitous they are and what kind of role they play in our everyday lives. They make a pretty critical part of how we make decisions, gather information, and how we build trust and engage with a variety of brands. You'll all be very familiar to greater or lesser degrees with some of the brand images that are up on that screen. And if we think about it, whether you are buying a fridge or an iron or a kettle, something quite mundane really from John Lewis, whether you're looking to book a trip or your next holiday, whether you're looking to find a local tradesman who's reputable, whether you're booking your child's football match, whether you are looking to assess the skills and experience of a candidate you're about to interview by using LinkedIn. We use these tools all the time, and it influences our behavior, it influences our motivation, and it influences our trust in brands. So who here uses the yellow pages to find out the details for a restaurant? Probably very few of you, because a name and a telephone number actually isn't sufficient anymore. We want to find out about other people's experiences. We want to find out as to the perception of quality to inform our decision. So while online communities used to be quite esoteric, I think they are quite prevalent in all aspects of our lives, particularly those who use the internet all the time and have your iPhone with you. And I think any brand that does not use online communities actually looks at odds with the rest of the market. So what all these communities have in common is that they generate trust and belief. And we know that trust is incredibly important when it comes to doing business with each other. So why does this matter to you, and why does it matter to an employer? Well, the old-fashioned tools that we use to communicate no longer really are fit for purpose. When people went to the same office day in, day out, sat at the same desk, then the town hall meeting, the office circular was sufficient. That's not really the case anymore. We all know that the workplace in which we operate and work is changing quite rapidly. And so the relationship we have with our employees is starting to change as well. And we need to take advantage of these communities that exist in our everyday lives within the workplace to our own benefit. Now, the people on the previous slide, the old-fashioned one, they would not recognize the workplace in which we operate today. To give you a few examples of things which we know exist, people working from home on a regular basis, they are disconnected from the workplace. Virtual teams who are working on a project but rarely meet each other. International teams who don't meet in person. Zero-hour contracts and gig working. Business by Skype, compressed hours, and blurred working hours. All of these things contribute to a very difficult environment which it is to communicate. And in fact, couldn't think of really of a much tougher environment in which to generate trust. So we have to change the dynamic and the way in which we operate to go about rebuilding that trust. Now, I believe every workplace is ready to capitalize on the recognition economy, but it's not really about revolution, it's about evolution. We know that when an employee walks through the door to your business, they don't leave the ingrained behaviors and expectations behind them. They expect them to be prevalent and present in the workplace as well. Getting likes, being recommended, giving stars and winning kudos, they're all part of our day-to-day lives. And all of these highly visible forms of recognition make up the common currency that is the digital world in which we operate. So if we're all wired to interact in this way in our normal lives, over the most mundane things such as buying a kettle or a fridge, then how do we leverage that opportunity to take advantage of it within the workplace to best effect? Because clearly that will have a huge impact. So the good news for me is that every organisation of any size already has these communities who help each other out, celebrate success, congratulate each other on their achievements and share motivational messages. The problem, though, is that often these are largely invisible and inaccessible to outsiders. In many organisations as well, recognition the recognition and reinforcement of corporate values and behaviours is not done as well as it could be. So the challenge is one of realising that the analogue way of working is not really fit for a digital world, and organisations need to evolve. And that means working with new rules of the road. And I want to break that down just to two areas. The first one is the systems and the processes that underpin this needs to adapt, and also how we build the right culture as well. From a systems perspective, for something to be effective, it has to work around the demands of the way we do business today. It must provide a recognition framework and be agile enough to adapt as a business grows or pivots into new markets. It cannot be a static, immutable thing that does not evolve and grow with the business as it adapts and grows. And it must be easy to change. It works at the pace of the organisation, not the other way around. Ultimately, it needs to provide a place where recognition can be very visible, and which gives structure and consistency, and it gives information about the hotspots in an organisation as to how they're operating so that you can make changes accordingly. From a cultural perspective, I think there are 5 key things which we see in organisations which need to adapt and change. The first one is around trust. It's about giving everybody in the organisation the ability to celebrate success with each other without permission. I should not need permission to say well done, thank you, or good work in a very visible and open way to any of my colleagues. And often we see hierarchy and structure and processes fighting against that. You have to make it peer-to-peer. Let everyone celebrate with each other. It should not be going through a manager or some sort of panel or some sort of central controlling mechanism that decides what is good and what is not good. If I believe something is good and I want to thank someone or want to express my appreciation, I should be allowed to do so. And allowing everyone to participate and engage makes a huge shift in terms of people's feelings towards the organisation, towards their manager and towards their peers. It needs to be instant. Again, we see often processes and the methods take time. Something that you did good on Monday, you find out 2 weeks later that you've been allowed to say thank you or well done for it. It needs to happen quickly and effectively. And we all work in a digital world with smartphones, and therefore we expect the same in the workplace as well. It needs to not conflict with that. Digital by default and not a bolt-on. My comment here is that why can't an employee that sat on their bus going to work comment on a recognition from one of their colleagues and say well done? Why can't they redeem a reward for something, for an outstanding piece of work that they've done? They should be able to access this anytime, any place, anywhere, not just when they're sat at their desk. And I think if you get those things right, it tends to remove some of the constraints and some of the restrictions that you have, and it makes it or allows you to deliver the message to be a bit more fun, to be more engaging. The immediacy of it, the level of communication, the volume of communication dramatically increases, and therefore people's understanding and perception of what good is, what success looks like, starts to become much more visible and much more transparent. I think social recognition sometimes can sound a bit of a soft, a bit of a fuzzy term, but we do know that it plays a critical role in reinforcing the behaviours and the values that an organisation has, and it builds trust amongst teams. Now, there's no end of research by some very clever consultants, reams of papers that sort of explain to you what the benefits of having a strong recognition culture are. I'm not going to drown you in detail, but I want to pick out some of the points which really have resonance with me as to where the impact can be. Now, many of you will be familiar with the Harvard Surface Profit Chain, which simply says happy, positive, motivated employees deliver a better experience to customers. Nothing new there, nothing particularly dramatic, but there's huge amounts of research that shows if you measure customer satisfaction, those organisations that deliver a better experience actually make more money. So there's quite a nice virtuous circle to this. If employees feel valued, if they feel that they can contribute to the organisation's success, and if they see that success quite transparently and openly, they feel appreciated by their managers and their peers, then clearly it's going to be something which encourages them to apply discretionary effort. The second thing I think is quite interesting is there's very strong statistical evidence to show that it leads to a greater culture of innovation. And in this case, you've got Tessera Group saying that you're 33% more likely to be proactively innovating and generating twice as many ideas per month. Now, I think it's quite difficult to measure innovation, but I think the value and quality it correlates directly to the workplace culture is quite interesting. I don't think you can order someone to be creative. It has to be something that's coaxed out of them. You have to create an environment and a culture in which they feel that they've got the permission and the ability to be able to bring ideas which can be taken on board by the organisation. And a recognition culture underpins that and creates that kind of philosophy around openness of communication, sharing, and being able to explain to everyone else what you feel is good and where you're doing well, and where your colleagues are doing well and how they're supporting you. Clearly, the underpinning of this is having leaders and managers who can deliver and understand the kind of performance from a behavioural perspective of their teams as well. And again, the big stark contrast here is the number of organisations, or a percentage of organisations who have strong working relationships, around 80%, where there's a good recognition culture, contrasted with 35%. And it's that shift. It clearly shows that when recognition is put in place, when the right culture, the right tools, and the right environment is there, it leads to a high level of engagement, better working relationships amongst teams and between managers as well. So clearly, I think recognition should not be seen as a nice to have. It needs to be part of your management framework. It needs to be part of the way that you do business, because there are clear benefits both to the individuals, to the managers, and to the organisation as well. Retention of talent clearly is a huge topic, and I would never claim that recognition is the golden bullet or the ability to be able to solve all of your problems. What we can agree on, though, is that the cost of re-recruiting lost talent is incredibly expensive. I think ACAS puts it around £30,000 per employee, which is quite frightening. So anything you can do that helps with the organisation in terms of people's feeling of belonging, people feeling valued, that other people understand them and appreciate their efforts, is obviously going to contribute in a positive way towards that. And again, the interesting statistic here is the contrast between 3 times more likely to stay with an organisation when you've got a strong culture of recognition than those that haven't. So I don't think everyone will ever argue, certainly no one in this room would ever argue that they want less collaboration, less team working. It's counterintuitive, isn't it? I think the problem has often been that the challenge of delivering that from a systems and from a technology perspective has been quite daunting. HR resource constraints, cost constraints, running multiple projects, the time taken to implement new software have all kind of acted as a barrier to wanting to do something which intuitively is the right thing to do. I don't believe that's the case anymore. We have software now which is cloud-based, which is plug-and-play recognition software, which you can bring into the workplace in a much more immediate and transparent way. And what that allows you to do is to focus on the cultural aspects of this, the communication, the training aspects, rather than doing an ERP implementation over several months, which we all know is not what anybody wants to do because it's a pain in the backside. I think the other part of this as well is that systems allow us to give us transparency of data and information. Leaders and managers often struggle with the insight they need as to how their teams are performing from a behavioural perspective. And I get inundated with sales data, KPI data, customer satisfaction data, finance data, but I don't get very much which tells me how my team is interacting and performing with other people in the organisation and with each other. These systems can do that. I think it's not just the HR director who wants to have an MI report on people performance. Why can't you have that pushed down throughout the organisation so that there's something which is immediate, which allows you to understand what's happening and to react accordingly? It allows managers to be, I suppose, at the front line and behaving in a much more agile way with their teams. And I think there's also a mandate that every business has to be a digital business. Employees expect it. We know that digitisation, automation brings an awful lot of benefits. It's also very cost effective as well. So 5 things which I'd like to conclude on, which I think are the sort of key takes from this. It's about the system and processes supporting the organisation, not dictating to it. The dynamic needs to change. My experience of spending months building these complex bits of software that you then roll out and then take a long time to adapt and change needs to go away. We need to have something which is much more fluid and much more agile in the way that it's both delivered and which it changes. So it's about the speed of implementation. It's about the ongoing adaptability. It is not ERP technology, and it should not be set in stone. It has to move with the ebb and flow of the organisation. It's about empowering managers and leaders at all levels with that information so that they can see the behaviour and the performance of their people in a much more informed way and allow them to do something about it. It's about leveraging and taking advantage of concepts that exist in our everyday lives through online communities, building on communication principles that fit a digital world for the benefit of your employees, your managers, and your customers. And it's about accessibility anywhere. Liking a comment, recognising a colleague, spending your reward should be able to be done whether you're sat on the bus, whether you're having your lunch in the park, not just when you're sat at your desk. Thank you very much.